The Millers had a different life before the sanctuary. It was a life defined by the relentless, low-grade hum of urban anxiety. Sirens were a nightly lullaby, the slam of a car door an instant alarm. Mark, a software architect, and Sarah, an elementary school teacher, spent their days navigating a world that felt perpetually on the verge of chaos. Their children, Lily and Sam, were kept on a tight leash, their playtime in the small city park a carefully supervised affair. They believed they were good parents, but the constant worry wore them down, leaving them drained and perpetually on edge. Then they found the sanctuary. It wasn't just a housing development, it was an escape hatch. The marketing brochures showed children with sun-kissed hair laughing on expansive green lawns, couples toasting champagne in immaculate gardens, and a sleek, iron gate that stood as a symbol of absolute, impenetrable safety. The gate, more than anything, sold them. It was a physical manifestation of a promise. A promise that outside worries, outside dangers, simply could not get in. They bought a 2-story home with a wraparound porch and a backyard that spilled into a protected greenbelt. The house itself was perfect, but the true prize was the community. The roads were quiet, the air was clean, and every home was a fortress, not just in its construction, but in its assumed security. They were surrounded by people who had bought the same dream. Their next-door neighbors, the Petersons, were a retired couple who spent their days gardening. Across the street lived the young and energetic Andersons, whose twins were the same age as Lily and Sam. For the first 2 years, their belief in the sanctuary was unwavering. The patrol cars, with their quiet, professional demeanor, seemed to glide effortlessly through the streets, their presence a comforting thought. The Millers learned to leave their garage door unlocked for a few minutes while they brought in groceries. They let Lily and Sam ride their bikes all the way to the community pool without a parent in tow, watching them from the kitchen window until they disappeared around a bend. Sarah found herself sleeping more soundly than she had in a decade. Mark's late-night anxiety attacks became a distant memory. They had escaped. They had finally found peace. But the first, almost imperceptible cracks began to form. It started small, a series of bizarre and easily dismissed incidents. A string of pranks, really. Mrs. Albright, a kind woman who lived 3 houses down, had her favorite garden gnome, a chuffed fisherman with a pipe, stolen from her flower bed. A week later, it was found sitting on the front steps of the community clubhouse, its fishing pole replaced with a small, hand-carved stick. Everyone laughed it off. Kids these days, Mrs. Albright had said with a chuckle, though a flicker of unease danced in her eyes. A month later, Mr. Henderson, a notoriously fussy man, reported his mail missing. It was found a few days later, meticulously sorted into recycling bins a street away. Just a careless postal worker, he grumbled. But he started checking his mailbox with a new, suspicious vigilance. Then came the bigger, more sinister anomalies. A few homes reported strange power surges, brief, almost unnoticeable flickers that tripped circuit breakers. The community security company blamed it on a faulty substation and promised to fix it. The residents, eager to believe, accepted the explanation without question. There was no real danger, they told themselves. It was just an inconvenience. The Millers, immersed in their idyllic life, barely noticed. Their days were filled with school plays, soccer practices, and weekend barbecues. They were a family unit, a perfect little bubble of happiness. They had come to believe that the world's harsh realities were a distant echo, a problem for other people, for the ones who lived outside the gate. The promise shattered on a Tuesday night in late September. A storm, a tempest of biblical proportions, had rolled in from the coast, a surprise to everyone. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows and bending the trees in their yard to a breaking point. It was a fitting prelude to the terror that was to come. Mark was in bed, scrolling through a news feed on his tablet. Sarah was already asleep beside him, her breathing slow and even. The children were tucked in, Sam in his race car bed, Lily in her princess-themed room down the hall. A powerful gust of wind hit the house, and in that instant the power died. Not a gentle fade, but a sudden, violent cessation of all sound. The hum of the air conditioner, the low whir of the ceiling fan, the gentle thrum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. All gone. The house was plunged into a deep, absolute silence, broken only by the shriek of the wind and the pounding of the rain. "Probably the storm," Mark muttered to the darkness, his words a desperate attempt at reassurance. He got up to find a flashlight, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. He heard Sarah stir in the bed behind him. Then came the sound. It was a sharp, distinct crack like a gunshot. It was the sound of glass shattering. And then, a moment later, a soft, almost melodic chime that seemed to ring in the sudden, terrifying silence. Mark froze, every nerve ending in his body screaming. He stood there, a statue of pure, unadulterated fear, his mind refusing to accept what he had just heard. A breaking window, the chimes of the security system, but the chimes were all wrong. They were gentle, not the jarring, insistent alarm he was used to. He heard a low rumble of thunder, a final, mocking confirmation of the storm. But he knew, with a primal certainty that bypassed logic, that the shattering glass and the strange chimes had nothing to do with the weather. He crept back to the bed, fumbling for his phone. He held it up to the faint light from the window and saw the dreaded red no service icon. The landline, of course, was dead, its power cut with the rest of the house. He moved with a quiet urgency, his mind racing. He had to secure the room. He pushed the heavy oak dresser against the door, his muscles screaming with the effort. He found Sarah's face in the dark, her eyes wide with terror. He whispered the words he had never thought he would have to say in this house. "Something's wrong. There's someone in the house." Their barricaded paradise was no more. The sanctuary's security, they would later learn, was its greatest weakness. The killer wasn't a random outsider. He was a ghost, a serial squatter who had been living undetected in their perfect community for months. He knew their rhythms, their vulnerabilities. He had studied their vacation schedules and their late-night habits. He had seen the unlocked service door, the one they never used, the one they had left open for a moment too long while bringing in groceries. The chime they heard wasn't the security alarm. It was the sound of their carefully constructed illusion being dismantled, piece by piece. He had entered through that service door in the basement, a door that had been left unlocked for a few brief minutes, trusting that the perimeter of the community would be enough. The breaking window was a red herring, a way to confuse them, to draw them out, or to make them believe the threat was a common one. But this was no common threat. Sarah, a woman who had never thought of herself as particularly strong, felt an instinctual power surge through her. Her children. She crept down the hall, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest. She found Lily and Sam huddled together in their beds, their small faces pale in the moonlight. They were quiet, sensing the danger. She took them, one in each arm, their small bodies a warm, precious weight. She led them back to the master bedroom, moving like a shadow, a family of frightened mice. The terror was an almost physical presence, a cold hand on her throat. She heard a soft footfall in the hallway outside their room. Mark stood ready, clutching a golf club he had grabbed from the closet, a pathetic weapon against an unseen enemy. A voice from the other side of the door, a calm, almost friendly voice, shattered their resolve. "I'm not going to hurt the kids," it said, the words a poison. "Just you. You're the ones who stole my peace." The voice was what they would remember most. Not the shattering glass, not the silent house, but the casual, almost conversational tone. It wasn't the voice of a monster. It was the voice of a neighbor, a man they might have seen on a walk, a face they might have nodded to. This was the true horror. The evil was not from outside the gate. It was already inside. The man in the hallway, whose name was David, was a ghost. He was a disgruntled former construction worker, a man who had helped build the sanctuary. He had been there from the ground up, seen the gleaming promises and the extravagant wealth. He had seen the Millers move in, their faces radiant with the hope of a better life, and felt a bitter resentment fester inside him. His own life was a series of eviction notices, forgotten bills, and empty promises. He saw their peace, their serenity, as a theft. They had taken something that should have been his. He was a squatter not just in their homes, but in their very lives, in their sense of peace. He didn't want their things. He didn't want their money or their jewelry. He wanted their lives. He wanted to feel what it was like to be safe and secure, and in his deranged mind, he believed the only way to do that was to take it from them. He had left a trail of bodies not just in the sanctuary, but in other communities like it, places that advertised an impenetrable utopia. The chime they heard wasn't a breaking window. It was the killer, now inside the house, using a remote to disable the security system he had been watching for months. He had entered through a service door in the basement, a door that had been left unlocked, trusting that the perimeter of the community would be enough. The window breaking was a red herring, a way to lure them into a false sense of what was happening. Sarah, a woman who had never felt a need to be strong, felt an instinctual power surge through her. Her children. She found Lily and Sam huddled together in their beds, their small faces pale in the moonlight. She took them, one in each arm, and led them into the master bedroom. They were quiet, sensing the danger. They moved like shadows, a family of frightened mice. The terror was an almost physical presence, a cold hand on her throat. She heard a soft footfall in the hallway outside their room. Mark stood ready, clutching a golf club he had grabbed from the closet, a pathetic weapon against an unseen enemy. A voice from the other side of the door, a calm, almost friendly voice, shattered their resolve. "I'm not going to hurt the kids," it said, the words a poison. "Just you. You're the ones who stole my peace." The climax was a desperate, primal fight. Mark, fueled by a love for his family, fought with a ferocity he never knew he possessed. He wasn't a hero. He was just a father, a man fighting for the only thing that mattered. Sarah, using a forgotten skill from her youth, managed to hotwire a phone in their closet and dial 911. The operator's voice a beacon of hope in the darkness. They survived. But the Millers didn't just survive an attack. They survived the death of an ideal. The illusion of safety was gone, replaced by a new, brutal reality. The sanctuary was now a mausoleum of broken promises, a place of silent ghosts and locked doors. The iron gate stood tall as ever, but for them, it no longer represented a barrier to danger. It represented a cage they had once believed in, and a lesson they would never forget. The first few weeks after the attack were a blur of police interviews, tearful phone calls with family, and a chilling sense of displacement. Their home, once a symbol of their perfect life, was now a crime scene. Every corner held a memory, not of laughter and light, but of fear and near-fatal violence. The scent of disinfectant and police chalk felt like a permanent stain on their walls. The rest of the sanctuary was reeling. The community, once a bastion of peace and tranquility, was now a hive of activity. Police tape cordoned off 2 other houses on their street, homes where David, the squatter, had hidden and watched. The news vans lined the main entrance, their bright lights a harsh spotlight on the community's shattered illusion. It turned out David had left a trail of bodies not just in the sanctuary, but in other communities like it. His obsession with peace and safety had led him to believe that the only way he could find it was by taking it from others. The Millers had been one of his last targets. The community's trust was gone. Neighbors who once left their garage doors open now double-locked their windows and installed alarm systems with redundant batteries. The patrol cars, once a symbol of peace, were now a constant reminder of their failure. The iron gate, once a symbol of protection, was now a symbol of a lie. Mark and Sarah tried to return to normal, but normal was gone. Lily and Sam, once carefree and boisterous, were now quiet and jumpy. The slightest noise, a sudden wind gust, or a car backfiring would send them scurrying to their parents' sides. They saw the world not as a place of endless possibility, but as a place of shadows and unseen dangers. One evening, Mark was walking through the house, the old, familiar weight of anxiety settling in his stomach. He saw Sarah sitting in the living room, staring out the window at the now empty street. The sun was setting, casting long, mournful shadows across the lawn. "It's not the same, is it?" he said, his voice quiet. Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. No, she said. It's not. The house is the same, but we're not. The sanctuary, it was never a place. It was a feeling that we were safe. And that feeling is gone forever. They sold the house a few months later. They didn't want to live in the cage they had once believed in. They moved to a quiet, unassuming neighborhood in a nearby town. A place with no gates, no patrol cars, and no promises. They learned to live with the anxiety, with the knowledge that danger could come from anywhere, from anyone. They learned to be vigilant, to trust their instincts, and to find a different kind of peace. A peace not of illusion, but of hard-won reality. The iron gate of the sanctuary still stands. It still promises a perfect life, a life of absolute safety. But for the Millers, the gate will always be a reminder of the night. They learned that danger wasn't what was kept out. It was what was already inside.